Hello, everyone, and welcome to this morning's Meet the Funders session. My name is Daniel Roberts. I work for Transformation Cornwall. I am joined today by Liz Wallace. Give us a little wave. And Liz, who are you joining us from this morning, rather?
Well, I'm actually out at St Eville today, but I work for the Diocese of Truro. So
Lovely. And you've also got Pat with you this morning. Morning, Pat.
Good morning, Daniel. Yes, we're here on this lovely morning. Looking forward to hearing what people have to say.
Lovely. And also with us this morning is Colm Taylor from Cornwall Community Foundation. Hi, Colm.
Hi, everyone.
Great. So just to let you know a little bit more about Meet the Funders, if you've never joined us for a Meet the Funders programme before, Meet the Funders is a year-long programme which strengthens community work in Cornwall. We take people through the key stages of developing, funding and sustaining community work. Today's particular focus is on funding. So we're going to be looking at the key questions that you might find in a funding application. And there's also going to be an opportunity to hear from Colm, who works for CCF, who's one of those lovely organisations that can come alongside you and financially support you and get alongside you in your vision and help it make it a reality. Our first speaker today is Colm. So without further ado, Colm, it's over to you.
Lovely, thank you. Sorry, how do I do my screen share? Here it is. Oh, sorry, am I clicking right? There we go. Right. Sure. Lovely. So thank you very much for introducing me today. I take it everyone can see my screen. Super. So go back. So yes, I've come today from Cornwall Community Foundation. We are a small grant provider in Cornwall. We are part of UKCF, United Kingdom Community Foundations, of which there are dozens throughout the United Kingdom, groups like us. So there's Devon Community Foundation, there's Scotland Community Foundation, Bristol Community Foundation, etc., etc. And yes, like I said, we are a grant provider operating throughout Cornwall, supporting and strengthening the charity sector. We've existed since 2003, and in that time, we have given out over £8 million worth of grants to Cornish communities and supporting over 4,800 grassroots organisations. And as you can imagine, our workload has increased quite dramatically in the past year. In 2019, we grant supported about £850,000, and then last year that's 1.6 million. And we've done that again in September, between January and September of this year. So our work has grown very dramatically as a result of COVID and a response to that in the sector. So the question you're all probably wondering is, what do we fund? Which is a quite important question. And the answer is we support both community groups and also individuals. We've got many different funds and they're open at different times, close at different times, support different aims and what have you. So in terms of our individual funds, we have things like Young and Talented, we have the Duke of Cornwall's Benevolent Fund, we have crisis funds, we have the Emily Belifo Fund, and we've also got several group funds, such as our regional funds, and things I'm quite focused on at the moment are our Social Enterprise Fund and our Business Club Fund. Our funds typically range from about £1,000 to £5,000. For a Social Enterprise Fund, that can go up to £20,000. There's a very specific criteria for that. In terms of supporting individuals, it's much smaller. It's about trying to help people with usually immediate needs. So that can be, £200 to £400 per person. And like I said, they're all open and closed at different times. So the question you're now thinking is, well, how do you apply to one of these funds? And the way I'd recommend doing that is by going through our One programme, which we started this year, which is a very brief application, which you can find on our website. And what you do is you tell us about yourselves and what you're looking for funding for. So that can be, you're looking to start a food bank, you're looking to run a film club, you're looking to have like a coffee morning type of thing. Tell us where you are, tell us about yourselves, what type of group you are, and then from there we try and place you with the fund that's most suitable. Like I said, we have so many different funds, it's very difficult for us it'd be very difficult for a lot of people to apply to the right fund at the right time because application deadlines are coming up, they're closing. I've got a very small board of just a couple of funds open behind me, and I've got to keep notes to remember what I'm doing. And we have that many funds and deadlines, it'd be impossible to get a lot of people to the right fund at the right time. So tell us about yourselves, we'll place you with the best funds, and then we'll send you an application form. And then you send that back, and then we get it ready for panel. So yeah, like I said, if you want to go for our one fund, the best thing to do is go onto our website, which is cornwallcommunityfoundation.com. And on there, you'll see something about grants, scroll down a little bit, and then you'll see, click here for the expression of interest form. That's where you fill in the stuff about who you are and what you want to do. I'd also recommend checking out our application guidelines as well, because there are criteria we need to be funded. We need to see certain supporting documents, and all that information is on there. So yeah, these are some of the supporting documents we will ask for when it comes to an application. So that's, we want to see your governing document. It can be a constitution, articles of association, what have you. Really, we're very much looking for in there, what are your objectives as an organisation? That should be set out in your constitution or your articles. And your dissolution clause, what happens when you wind up, because groups start, groups close quite often. And the last thing you want to do is give you £5,000 and then your group wind up and then no one's quite sure what happens with that money. So we just want to make sure you've got a solid dissolution clause in there. You need to have at least 3 unrelated members on your management committee. That's because sometimes people start groups and they've got a great idea and they've got a project they want to run. And so they get their husband, their wife involved, they get their son, daughter involved as well. And then they can't really make independent decisions of each other because they're all related. So we do want to see 3 unrelated members of the management committee as well. And if you're a registered charity, we want to see that you're on the charity commission, or usually if you're a CIC, we want to see that you're on Companies House and what have you. We want us to see things like safeguarding policies as well. That's very important. We want to make sure that if you're working with children or vulnerable people, that you've clearly thought about what happens in terms of making sure that they're safe and operating safely. We want to see your last annual accounts. If you're a new group and you haven't got annual accounts yet, that's fine. But if you've been existing for more than a year, we want to see those annual accounts. And we want to see a bank statement from the last 3 months. There's 2 reasons for this. One is we want to make sure you haven't suddenly come into millions and millions of pounds without us realizing. And the other reason is just to make sure that we have the right bank details for you as well, because the last thing we want to do is award you some money. There's a missed digit somewhere within the bank details, and suddenly that money's gone to, Daniel, and he's run off to Belize with it or something. So making sure we've got the right bank details for you, relevant insurance policies and equal opportunities as well. That's quite important. And like I said, it says at the bottom there, if you're we may occasionally ask for references as well, particularly if you're a new group. We just want to make sure that you are there's people independent of your group that understand who you are, and they think that what you're looking to deliver is deliverable. So there are some things we can't fund, such as commercial or profit-making organisations. We can only fund non-charitable group, non-profit-making groups. If you've got millions and millions of pounds in your reserves, we're not going to fund you because, like I said, we're a small funder, and if you're asking for £1,000 to start a film club and you've got £2 million in your bank, we're going to say, why don't you just use those millions of pounds you've already got? We can't fund public sector organisations, so parish and town councils we can't fund, and you can see the rest of the list there. Retrospective grants we get asked about quite often. We can't fund retrospective funding. So if you've already spent the money and you're looking to recover some of the costs, I'm afraid we can't help with that. And the most important one there, I think, is in particular we can't help fund projects which is trying to influence people's religious choices. So that doesn't mean we can't fund churches. It just means that if your primary objective in your project is to influence someone's choices, I'm afraid we can't help with that. So churches can start food banks, churches can run film clubs, churches can do things to support the community which is not inherently religious in the project, and that's fine for us to fund. But if it's looking to try and influence people's religious beliefs, I'm afraid we can't help. So in terms of what makes for a good application, there's a few things we always ask to see, which is one, that you understand there's a need for your project. How do you come to that conclusion? If you're going to tell me that you need to run a food bank, tell me how you know that there are people impoverished in your area looking, needing help with food parcels. I don't doubt there is lots of need out there and very small isolated pockets where this is really important. But if you are just guessing that there's people that need help with food banks, that doesn't make for a very good application. We want to see there's value for money. People will sometimes apply to us and want the most high modded, top of the range spec things, and might only use them once. So if you're saying that, well, maybe our food bank will need a laptop, but we're not sure, and we're going to get the best laptop we possibly can, that's a question of, is that value for money for us? We want to see that there's a measurable impact, that you're going to make a difference and you can show us that difference. That's what we're talking about when it comes to measurable impact. And we like to see sustainability as well. Once our funding's gone, how is your project going to keep running? Are you going to be entirely grant dependent? That doesn't make for a very good application. If it is, we want to see that you're thinking into the future and thinking, once this initial lot of money's gone, my project's going to carry on into the future. And also, we're asking more these days about environmental impact. We are living in a climate crisis. We all recognise that. And Cornwall Community Foundation is now very interested in seeing that you've considered the environmental impact of your project. So if you're going to apply to us and say, we need a new fence around our building, and we're going to get wood imported from China for it, we're going to say, why have you chosen that? What's the environmental impact of shipping in all this wood? What's the environmental impact of going for something that isn't as sustainable? So it's not that projects have to be entirely carbon neutral, it's just that we want to know that you've considered environmental impact in your project. So that's my introduction to Cornwall Community Foundation. If you've got any questions, happy to take them now. But like I said, the most important thing to do is go on our website, fill in an expression of interest if you want to apply for something. You're more than welcome to always email me as well, just to say, this is my idea for a project. What do you think? Is this something that you can support? And when it comes to writing your application, always think about how you know there's a need, how you're going to make it value for money, and how that project's going to be sustainable. So, thank you very much. Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Colin. That's really helpful. And if anybody does have a question, please just pop that either in the chat or in the Q&A box. It's a little easier for us to see it in the Q&A box, but either will be fine. But obviously, while you're thinking of those, I'm sure, Colin, is it okay for people to email you if they have a question afterwards?
Yes, shall I put my email in the chat? That'd be the best thing to do.
That'd be lovely, thank you.
No problem.
Great.
My name is not spelled in the traditional way, so people can sometimes hear my name and assume it's Callum, and then those emails never get to me.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And I've said your name right, haven't we? It is Colin. So you say it. It's right, so it's not said with an A. Lovely, great. Thank you. I can't see any questions popping up at the moment. So, and actually, to save your voice probably is a good idea if people email you, poor thing. So, well, thank you so much, Colin. That's really helpful. Is it okay for us to send the slides out to people afterwards as well?
Yes, of course, that's fine. I think I've just had a question come in from Judith. Can you have more than one application at the same time? We don't like to see that. We like to see that you're focused on one project. So I'd say normally, no. There might be the odd circumstance where that is fine, but I'd say as a rule of thumb, no, we prefer to have just one application in at a time.
Great, thank you. Great question.
Great. And before you go, there is one final question for you, Colin, and then we will let you go. Jenny says, we submitted an expression of interest and received a reply to say there are currently no grant programs to support our request. So do we need to keep reapplying, or will you let us know if something suitable arises?
So it'd be very difficult for us to email. As I said, I think we support hundreds of groups each year. So it'd be very difficult for us to say, well, now's the right time for you to apply. So I'd suggest reapplying if you've got something that's more suitable. I'd also encourage you to sign up for our newsletter as well. If that way is the best way to keep up with what new funds we have coming up, what new deadlines we've got coming as well. So that's what I'd suggest.
Great, thank you. All right, well, thank you, Colin, and we'll let you go now and rest your voice. Hope you feel better soon.
Thank you very much.
All be well. Yeah, so yes, take it easy, and yeah. So
Thanks, Colin. Bye now.
bye for now. Thank you. Bye. Right. Okay. Well, I hope that was helpful, that first session. I'm going to hand over to Daniel, who's going to lead us in the next section, looking at those big questions that we find in applications for funding. Thank you, Daniel.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Liz. Yes, hi everyone. I'm Daniel. I work for Transformation Cornwall, and this morning I'm going to be talking a little bit about the key questions that you can find in a funding application. So this is going to be quite a broad approach to funding applications, not specifics, because obviously each fund that you apply to will have its own intricacies and their own things that they would like to see. And of course, the best thing to do in those cases is to contact the column of that organisation to make sure you're putting your best foot forward. But in general, there are some good principles and some key principles that apply to most funding applications. So this morning, we're going to be having a little bit of time to look at the about section of a funding application. That's when they ask you about your charity, your group. We're going to look at setting out the need for your project. As Colin was saying, funders want to know that there is a need for what you're doing, and therefore that what they give you financially is going to go towards addressing that need. We're going to look at how to set out your beneficiaries. So that's quite precisely who it is that you are benefiting with your work. Then we're going to have a look at outputs and outcomes, which is a little bit about evaluation and how you can show the funder that you're thinking about evaluating your project and discerning whether you've done a good job, whether you're benefiting your beneficiaries. And then the final thing we're going to look at is looking towards the future, which is a little bit of time to think about the long-term sustainability of your project, not just in terms of funding and long-term financial stability, but also looking to the future in terms of environmental impact. Great. So the first things we want to do whenever you're going to apply to a grant, or even you're thinking of applying to a grant, is to check the eligibility criteria and the application guidelines. The absolute worst thing that can happen, and it's especially painful and resource intensive for smaller charities or community groups, is to spend a lot of time and energy putting together a funding application, only to find out at the last hurdle that actually you don't meet the eligibility criteria. And sometimes grants can have very strict eligibility criteria, whether that's who they reach, whether that's geographic, whether you need to have a historical link to XYZ. Jane, who often does this presentation, has a joke that, some grants will only fund flute players from Launceston that were born in the year 1975. That's how precise some grants can be. And yeah, it's best not to expend lots of time and energy on something that's not going to go anywhere. So have a look at the eligibility criteria carefully. And once you've assessed that you do meet that, then we can start to think about putting together our application. The next things that you might want to think about is supporting documents that they're going to ask for, knowing that you can access those and you can have those on hand, and also that you're going to have those on time for the grant submission deadline. And 4 is case studies. So some grants will ask for case studies of your beneficiaries and things like that. So think, do you have those to hand, or can you get those in time for the grant submission deadline? Because again, the last thing you want to do is put a lot of effort into a grant and then fall at the last hurdle because you can't have everything ready by the grant submission deadline. Great. So one of the first questions that grant applications often ask is about you and your project. And actually, these are often split into 2 distinct sections. So the first bit they're going to ask you about is your organisation and your main activities. And really, separately to the project that you're wanting to run or get funding for, this is just an opportunity to tell the funder a little bit about yourself, your vision, your mission, what you do, and your main ways of working. So, for example, here at Transformation Cornwall, we work to strengthen faith-based social action, and we work in 3 main ways. We work through our Meet the Funders program, which is putting on sessions like this. We offer one-on-one support to organisations to increase and grow their capacity, and we also facilitate networking between faith and mainstream organisations. So that's who we are as a charity, that's our vision, that's our mission, and we hope that in quite succinct terms, when we put that, or if we were to put that in the About section, that would give the grant maker a little bit of a flavour of who we are and what we do. This is an opportunity to speak about your organisation, but it's not the time to talk about the project that you are applying for funding for. The next bit that does come up very often is precisely that, specifics about your project, the name of your project, and describing your project. So here, you want to be quite specific about what you're going to spend the grant money on. So it's all very well and nice to say, for example, you know, we want to set up a community food larder or something like that. And there's a lot of social value in that. That's a great community project. But when you're describing your project, you want to sort of drill down from the specifics of the sort of big picture thinking of, this is what we want to do. This is our mission, which is what we were talking about first. And this is what we actually want to do in our project. And these are the specifics of what we're going to spend the grant money on. The more specific you can be, the more confidence you'll give to the grant maker that you've thought this through carefully, and that you've got, that you're a safe pair of hands essentially for their money, because there's a very direct and clear lines of spending where this is going to go. Next, all grant applications will want you to talk a little bit about the need for your project. And what is the need that your project is trying to address. The absolute last thing we want to do, any of us, you know, financially or in time or otherwise, is to spend a lot of time on a project addressing a need that isn't there. And I think that's always a risk, is if we haven't asked the right questions, if we haven't explicated the need, then we might be trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist, or we might be trying to fix it in the wrong way. So when you're talking about the need for your project, you want to talk about what problems or issues you aim to address. You want to describe why you need this funding. And you also want to be specific. Are you sustaining an existing project and looking towards the future of that, or are you developing a new project? And I think the most important point here is the 5th point. How did you first discover the need? And that brings us to evidencing the need for your project. We had an earlier Meet the Funders session where we talked about using data to demonstrate need. And actually, a lot of these things here come into that. So if you haven't had a chance to catch up on that, in the post event mail out, there'll be a link to all our previous webinar recordings. So you might like to have a look at that. But the way you can evidence the need for your project is through things like evaluations, community surveys, research statistics from local authorities or the census, community meetings, details of waiting lists to access services, local conversations, and case studies. These are all incredibly precise ways of demonstrating your need, and will let the grant funder know that you've done your research. You know that your project will bring social value because you've done the work to demonstrate that there is a need for what you want to do. Next thing to think about is your beneficiaries. And that's who will benefit from your project. So it's, again, as with all of these, if there's a sort of underlying principle, is the more specificity you can add, the more likely that your application will be seen as a strong and a safe pair of hands. So show them that you know who you're helping, that you've gone out to meet them, that you've spoken to them, that you know precisely who they are, and that you can come down and meet them in their specific circumstances. So your beneficiaries, who are they? What are their ages? Where do they live? Are they geographically close to where you want to do your project? Have you thought about the location? Or if it's not close, have you thought about perhaps how you would travel people to and fro to that location? What are their common needs? What is it that unites them as beneficiaries in need that your project is going to be looking to address? And it's also really helpful if you can put a precise numerical value on the number of people that you will benefit. a lot of applications will quite literally say, how many beneficiaries will your project impact? And they want to know how many people you expect to be coming to your community meeting or your wellbeing cafe. And if you can say, well, we expect, and we know from experience of similar events that, we can expect a solid 15 people weekly. And these are a rotating number, meaning that in a month we might reach 60 people or something of the like. If you can be precise about who you'll reach, then it makes it easier to see the beneficiary cost, how the money is going to benefit those particular people. And yeah, there's just another slide there of explaining the issues that your beneficiaries face. Looking towards the future then, a lot of grant applications, and increasingly so, have got increasingly large sections on monitoring and recording and things like evaluation. And this isn't something to be scared of at all. It's not, it's not them marking your homework or not trusting you or saying that, you need to spend a lot of time on evaluation activities. It's essentially just proving to the grant funder value for money, that you've thought about how you're going to demonstrate that you spent the money well, that you've thought about how you are going to evaluate your service and also improve it, because half the point of evaluation is to improve. And so if you can show that you've got good monitoring and recording principles in place that are going to evaluate your work, then you can show, okay, so if we learn that something isn't quite right, this is how we're going to adapt it. This is going to be our intervention principle. Often these evaluation concepts are framed using the words outputs and outcomes. So it's going to ask you to talk about the outputs and outcomes. And again, these words can sometimes sound really scary, and your first instinct might be to say, what is the difference between the two? Which is a very valid point. It is sometimes a little bit confusing. But this slide here, and I hope this is helpful, and we'll mail this out afterwards. An output describes what counts as your activity and the number of people who come. So an output asks, what do we do and who do we reach? Conversely to that, or rather alongside that, an outcome describes the impact of your service for your clients. What difference does it make? So we'll go through to the next slide now to look at an example, but to make that concrete, for example, here at Meet the Funders, our output might be the number of people that come to our spring event. It might be the number of people that come to this webinar, or the number of people that download the recording and watch it later. That's our numerical output. That's what we've done and who we've reached. The outcome of that, and what we would hope to evaluate by sending things like post-event surveys, is what difference have these webinars made? Have people, as a result of coming to these webinars, felt more empowered to fill out grant applications? Have they got more knowledge of who they might apply to as a result of hearing from people like Colm? That's our outputs, and then the outcome of that. So again, a good example here is an output would be young people with learning disabilities will take part in fortnightly arts and crafts workshops. And the outcome would be young people with learning difficulties will have improved social relationships, well-being, and community connections as a result in participating in community workshops. You want to monitor both of these. The way that you'd monitor the first one, output, would be, in numerical values, how many people are coming along to your events. And then your outcomes would come from user service reviews and surveys and things like that to see what difference is it making. And that can be, especially for community work, that can be quite relational. It can be case studies. It can be feedback quotes. If someone says to you, this meeting that you've put on for us, this community cafe has been an absolute lifesaver. It's made me feel so much better about myself and, given me somewhere to socialize. That is an outcome. And if you say to people, oh, okay, would you be willing for us to write that down so we can put this in our grant report? Absolutely, you can, because it helps show to the grant funder that what you're doing makes a real difference. And finally, before I hand back over to Liz, is looking to the future. So one of the things that grant funders don't want to do is give short-term funding to a long-term project if there hasn't been consideration of the sustainability of the project. Because the last thing you want to do is fund a really fantastic community project, but then in 5 years' time, say, when the money runs dry, it just have to stop and all those beneficiaries be left without, and then there's a new gap in community provision. One of the questions they're probably going to ask you is, what is the long-term sustainability of your project? How do you plan to fund it or keep it running in conjunction to this funding, or after this funding? Do you have a funding strategy? As it says there, what will you do after this funding ends? You don't often need to have the precise answer to that. It might be that your application says the immediate need for this is pressing, and so this funding will give us a stable core from which to carry out the next 5 years, and during those 5 years we will spend time, and this is our plan for long-term sustainability. But it needs to be shown that you've been thinking about that. Another question that comes up increasingly is, what about the environmental impact? And it was really interesting because Colin mentioned that for CCF. Increasingly, funders want to know that when you're doing good in your project, you're also doing good for the environment. And that can be things like, for example, if you're running a soup kitchen or something like that, thinking about the actual paper materials you're using. Or if you are renting a building, it might be asking the question, who is the energy provider? There are lots of templates out there for things like environmental audits and asking these sorts of questions. So it doesn't need to be precise. You don't need to give your CO2 outputs in precise kilos or anything like that. But funders will want to know and will feel reassured to know that you are asking the questions of how your project impacts the environment when you are planning. And that's the end of my presentation. I do hope that was useful. Back over to Liz.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel. No, that was very helpful, very much, especially when you think about what the funders are really asking at the back, what's the back of those questions. Now, has somebody got any questions? There's one here from Judith. Thanks. Is it good to have a snappy project title, or is something simply descriptive best?
Yeah, I think that will depend on the individual funder, definitely. And I will say it can sometimes be really difficult to sum up succinctly in a project title what exactly you're doing. I would say don't spend hours and hours worrying about the project title though, because in many ways that's sort of secondary to what the project does. But if you're sort of worried about that, email the column of the grant making body and say, this is our working title. Does this work for you, or do you need more specificity? But I would say that in my experience, the project title has always been kind of a little bit secondary to the actual nuts and bolts of the project itself.
Yes, thank you. That's right. Great. Any more? Does Transformation Cornwall help by looking over applications for you?
Yes, yeah, I hope that doesn't mean we'll get absolutely inundated. There might be a little bit of capacity. What we try to do at Transformation Cornwall is we always want to empower people, to feel confident to do it for themselves. But absolutely, if you're thinking about putting together a funding application and you've started doing the work and you have any questions, absolutely give us an email and we'd love to help. The last thing we want to do is write applications for people, because our real aim is to come alongside people, empower them to know that they've got the skills and they've got the ability to do it for themselves. But absolutely, we'd love to come alongside and assist wherever we can.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and that's also part of my role at the diocese as well. For anybody from an Anglican church in the diocese, I can also do that, offer that service by reading your applications. And it's really handy, actually. It's very helpful, even if it isn't one of us, to get somebody from outside the project to read it, because they can look at it with a fresh pair of eyes and then see whether it makes sense what you've written as well. Thank you. Oh, hang on. I think that's okay. I think that's all the questions for now. But as I said before, Colin, do email Daniel if you have any more questions on that. Right, well, we're now going to turn to a part of our Meet the Funders that we always have, our Meet the Experts, and Experts Through Experience, we call it. And so I'm really, really delighted to have Pat Alton with me here today from Oasis, and we're actually sitting in the community centre at St Evell, and where the brand new sparkly Oasis centre is based now. The original was set up back in 2008,
Yes.
wasn't it?
Yes.
At St Column Major, which Pat was instrumental in getting that set up. So I'm just going to take my thing out here now. Pat, would you like to tell us more about how that original idea came about, the vision, where did that come from, and what led you to set that up in St Column Major all the way back in 2008?
Oh, we didn't actually have any thought about doing it at the time, but we were in St Morgan parish, and the shopkeeper, who also ran a small post office, said, a little scathingly, because he's a bit anti-church, said, why don't you do something useful? I've got lots of people who need help. And we said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, I get really worried when some people don't come in for their pensions, or they don't come in on a regular basis like they normally do. And he said, I can't go around and see them. But he said, isn't that something you lot could do? So we said, yes, it is. And we got our pastoral carers involved. And he would say, look, I'm really worried about this person. And we would go around and we would see if there was any help that we could give them. And then the post people came and they would say to us, I couldn't get any reply at so-and-so's door, and that's a bit unusual. Could you send someone round it? And it grew. And we were quite unstructured at that point, but we thought, if we're going to grow like this, then we need some base to work from. And so we, in the end, after a lot of discussion, set up a shop front premises in St Column, which we shared at that point with the parish office, the benefice office. And we both worked out of there. But what we found sitting in the office was we saw a few people every day wandering up and down, looking quite lost. No matter what the weather, one of the women never had anything more on than a summer skirt and a cardigan, even if it was pouring with rain. And we thought, we've got to do something here. So we stopped one of them one day and said, look, we've noticed you wandering up and down here. Is there anything we could do to help? And she said, well, really, we've got nowhere to go, and we'd love a warm place to go and have a cup of coffee, because if we go anywhere and ask for a cup of coffee, they chuck us out after we've drunk it. And we just want somewhere to stay. And so gradually we spoke to all of them. And one of the men said, I'd really like to be able to go somewhere where somebody knows my name. And they just wanted somewhere to go and sit, really, and be warm. And so we said, okay, we'll start a coffee morning. And that's what it was about. It was only about having a coffee morning. But the first coffee morning, 12 people turned up. And then the next one, it was nearly double that. And these were people with real needs in the community. And so we sat down and we chatted to them and we said, what do you want? Do you want to meet every week? If you do meet every week, is there anything you'd like to do? And they said, we'd like to read a newspaper. We'd like to have hot drinks. We'd like to play table games, was what somebody came. And one lady said, I'd like to bring my knitting along. So we said, well, that's possible. None of that is a problem at all. And so that's where we started. And everything we've got now grew from that coffee morning and from our sort of insistence in as nice a way as possible that the people who came should take some responsibility for what was provided. So we would enable them to get things, but they would say to us, we would like to do. And we never tried to impose on them anything that we thought perhaps they should do. And that coffee morning grew, and people came in from the community, and a lady came in and said, I've had to retire as an art teacher because of my health, but I'd love to do some work here. So she set up an art group, which very, very popular. We had someone come in who made cards, and some of the cards they produced were so good that they were sold at the community market, and that gave them a real sense, you know, that they were contributing something. And then they talked about, might it be possible not just to have the morning, but to have the afternoon as well? And if we did that, would there be any scope for lunch? And we had quite a few people coming who had memory problems, not necessarily defined as suffering from dementia, but definitely having memory problems. And so we thought, right, we'll try and cater for that. So the morning became a very general morning with all sorts of activities. And the afternoon became much more geared to those who really needed a memory cafe. What was interesting was, after a while, the people and the carers who came along to the memory cafe actually said, couldn't we come to the other bit as well, rather than just being separated off? So we now have an integrated day where we try and provide activities for people who just are perhaps socially isolated, very lonely, and for those who have memory problems, and they all join in, all of it. And the care they show to each other is absolutely incredible. But we grew and grew, and we outgrew all the space we had at St. Column. And we thought, particularly the kitchen area, it wasn't big enough for us to do the lunches and things. And we thought, what are we going to do? And quite by chance, one of our trustees was connected to the St. Eville Centre, and she said, you know, I'm sure we've got more space up there. And this was a massive decision for us, because we had to think about, how do we get people from St. Column, many of whom are very vulnerable, how do we get them up to St. Eville? And we are doing that at the moment by the use of 2 minibuses from Newquay Lions and from Padstow. And so that is working very well at the moment. And of course, being up here, having all this space, then we've really been able to expand what we offer.
Yeah. Wow. So it's been an evolving project.
Absolutely.
by the sound of
absolutely.
it. And it's great. I mean, in the early, I mean, we talk when we're looking at about applications, it's about what the evidence there is there, but it's great that you were actually asking people in the community. There's some photos here. That a second. Actually, what they needed. So, this is a picture of the.
That's the men's shed.
That's the men's shed.
Yeah, that we've only just got that finished, and we're starting the use of it very soon. And to the left of it, you can just see the end of the polytunnel.
Yeah.
And in front of it, the raised beds, so that any of our people can actually do some gardening if they want to.
And that was given to you, wasn't it? From
The Mayor's Community Fund provided the men's shed, and the masons provided the polytunnel. The erection was somewhat complicated, but we were helped by workmen working on the new estate round here, who came in and helped us. But the whole thing was actually funded largely by Cornwall Community Foundation, who've been very, very supportive to us and have really helped us to get to where we are now.
Yeah.
But we haven't just concentrated on them, although they've been our main providers. We've tried to use as wide a range of funders as we can.
Right. Who have you had help from, funders wise?
Right. Well, I think we've had help from the National Lottery, but we've had the local churches have helped. Transformation Cornwall helped us because they talked to us about what was actually available. They knew much more about us, about that, than we did in those early stages. But the People's Health Trust supported us in our early years. The Joseph Rank Trust, the Rank Foundation, the Lang Family Trust, Awards for All, Cornwall Rural Communities Council.
Yeah.
That they did. Bedrooth and Steps Hotel, the wind farms, Rotary, Comic Relief, the Archer Trust, the Elm Grant Charity, Merrimore Pub. Merrimore Pub have been fantastic to us. They've provided all our tea, coffee, milk and biscuits for the past 10 years.
Wow.
And I've never taken anything
Yeah.
for that. So it's about finding out, not just hooking onto one charity, but really looking at what charities are there, which of them you meet the criteria, and then applying. And of course, very often you're not successful because there's massive demand for support from charities, but sometimes you are. And it's just worth, I think, keeping that broad spectrum rather than just focusing on a particular charity.
Yes, yeah, no, that's really helpful. And actually, like you say, if you're doing a project like this in the community wants to help and they're inspired by what you're planning to do, then like you found, you've had wonderful support.
We have.
From
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
When the first thing we needed when we got this plot of land was someone who could convert it from just a bit of scrubland really into our dream, our men's shed, our garden area, our allotments and everything. And we found a builder who was sympathetic to what we were trying to do. And he and his team have done all the building work on it. And they've actually charged us for a lot of the work that they've done, obviously. But because they really believe in what we're doing, they've also done quite a lot of that work free of charge. Yeah. And we found the same thing with our electrician, who is going to become a trustee in the near future. He did all the electrical work, but was really inspired again by what we were doing. And he said, if it's all right with you, I'm going to put in some closed circuit television, and I link it to your computer so you can actually be inside the building, but you can be keeping an eye on what's happening outside. He put in floodlights for us and didn't charge for that. And then I think he also put in free of charge closed circuit television for the whole centre. So the whole centre was more protected. So yeah, and like when the workmen came in to help from outside to help us put the polytunnel together, people have just been absolutely incredible in wanting to support what we're doing.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Pat. I wonder if anybody's got excuse me, any questions for Pat, because yeah, Pat, you've been doing this for how long was this now?
It's about 14 years altogether, yes, but it's about 12 years since we became a charity and properly registered.
Okay, yes, that's right. So it's your experience now of that is phenomenal and very helpful for lots of other people who are starting on that journey themselves. So yeah, so you can find, there's a website, isn't there? Oasis have a website?
Yes, we have a website. It's currently under review, but it's still accessible. And that tells you quite a lot of what we do, but not everything that we've started to do up here.
Yes, that's right. So
the other people who've helped us massively were Trewithen Dairies.
Oh, really?
Because of they had to close down. The Trewithen Gardens had to close down, and they had a place there where you could get tea and all sorts of things, and they couldn't open. And I think the person who owns it is a trustee of CCF. Right. And they asked if anybody could use their services, and we said yes.
So it came the other way rather than you approaching
but they provided something like 100 lunches a week for 6 months for us to distribute during the pandemic.
Wow, amazing. So did you find kind of getting all the local support, was that sort of talking to people? Did you write to people? What do you think was the best approach? What is the best approach for people to take?
All we've done is put up notices in the areas that we work in, which is St Columb, St Morgan, St Irvine, St Eville. We've put up notices in the library, in the shops and things like that, advertising. And we're very lucky in that we've got shopfront premises. And so we can do lovely window displays. And one of our trustees does that beautifully. And people have been attracted to that. They'll come into the shop and they'll say, what's it about? Or what do you do? And we talk to them. We get a lot of phone calls about people having heard about us, not necessarily being aware of what we do, but having heard and asking if we could help because this is the situation they're in. And so we've left it at that. And it seems to be largely word of mouth and people seeing the adverts that we put up around town.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. So it's getting the message out there in all sorts of different ways, isn't it? The vision for your project. Right. Well, unless there's any questions that have come in, which I can't see. Thank you, Pat, so much. It's been really helpful and inspiring, actually, for how it began, how it's developed and flourished and become what it is today. And your stamina is amazing.
I think the stamina of the volunteers is amazing.
But thank you for taking the time out to come today as well to talk to us as well. And thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I'll hand back over to Daniel.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Pat. Yeah, Pat and I went and had a look around the centre. I think it was last week when I took those photos, and yeah, fantastic work. The garden looks absolutely incredible. Great. Before we close off, there was just a quick question from Karen about becoming a CIC. How do I go about changing to one? If you want to be a CIC, if you think that's the best fit for what you're doing, a community interest company, it's an online application. There's a fee of about, I think it's between 27 or 35 pounds. I can't remember which one. And you need to fill out a statement of community interest purpose and have some governing documents, but that can be done online. Of course, CICs aren't the best fit for everyone, but if you wanted to know more about that, I'm sure we can email about that. And I think that's all the questions. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning. It's been wonderful to be with you. Hopefully this has been a really productive time and has piqued your interest and left you feeling a little bit more confident about funding applications and left you feeling inspired from Pat's expert testimony. Our next workshop will be on the 15th of November, and that, we are hoping, will be an in-person workshop, although there will be a hybrid live streamed element of that, and that's going to be at St Martin's Church in Liskeard. So booking details, if you would like to come along to that, will be sent alongside the post-event mail out for this event, which will include the presentations from myself and Colm, some pictures of St Eval if you want to have a look at those, and also a link to the recording and all our email addresses if you wanted to make contact. Anything else from Pat and Liz before we go?
No, I don't think so. No, we're always happy to talk about Oasis and what's going on. So no, it's been a lovely opportunity for me too.
Yeah, and just a reminder too that if you're at that early stage of wondering where you might get funding, Transformation Cornwall have a very comprehensive list, and also as part of the diocese, then there's a church grants website which also helps to find relevant funders for your particular project. Thank you.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely lunch break and hopefully see you soon. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.